What caused the expulsion/internment of Japanese Canadians? Even before Pearl Harbor, the Japanese and other Asians were hated by Canadians, mostly the British Columbians, due to anti-Asian racism. In 1907, British Columbian residents rioted in the nearby Japanese-Chinese communities. During this riot, many British Columbians attacked Japanese and Chinese residents and broke their windows. This resulted in the Prime Minister reducing the amount of Japanese immigrants per year to a maximum of 400. And a little over 20 years later, this was reduced to 150 Japanese immigrants per year. On December 7th, the Japanese raid on Pearl Harbor pulled the United States into World War II. This also caused the Canadians to be far more hostile towards Japanese Canadians and accuse them of being spies. Due to Pearl Harbor, on the 16th of December in 1941, a journalist named Bruce Hutchison went up to the Prime Minister's advisor and suggested that they organize a mass murder of Japanese Canadians due to pressure from the Vancouver Sun's readers. Japanese Canadian fishermen were forced to turn in their boats to the authorities, and their boats were later sold and searched by the RCMP for any evidence that Japanese Canadians could be spies or trying to sabotage the Canadian military. However, they found nothing, and even the Army and the Navy attempted to tell the government that the Japanese Canadians were not a threat, but instead they ignored the Army and Navy and started campaigning for the removal of Japanese Canadians on the coast.
Japanese Canadians are still residents and citizens of Canada. That means they have their individual rights. The government at that time has infringed on their rights plenty of times, forcing them out of their homes, forcing them out of the West Coast to more isolated areas, and not letting them return, as well as their rightful property being stripped away from them. Because of the government's fear, in addition to thinking Japanese Canadians are a threat to Canada, no Japanese Canadian could vote no matter what province they lived in. These acts go against their legal rights, mobility rights, equality rights, and democratic rights.
Things about the Japanese internment camps. When the Japanese were being detained and put inside of these internment camps, their properties such as homes, farms, businesses, and personal properties were sold because they were used to pay off the costs of detaining the Japanese Canadians. In 1945, when the Second World War ended, the Canadian government deported 10,000 Japanese Canadians because they refused to move to the Rocky Mountains. On January 14th, 1942, the Canadian Prime Minister ordered all adult males of Japanese ancestry to do road labor. They were also forced into road labor camps. In the late summer of 1942, all Japanese Canadians had been moved from the West Coast, and around 2,150 single men were sent out to do road labor. Japanese Canadians also were being separated from their families because they were being relocated. And since World War II struck, British Columbia started a campaign to detain all of these Japanese Canadians.